Awesome. Well, it's nice. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you a lot.
You're welcome.
How was your speech earlier? How'd that go?
I mean, it was good.
Yeah, I was trying to tune in, but I had guests on at the same time.
Yeah,
so
it's hard to do.
It was interesting. I promised my wife, she's like, I want you to talk to anyone. It's Danica Patrick.
Aww.
And so we were able to make it happen. So Anna.
Love it.
Danica, there you
Anna,
go.
that's your wife?
Yes, ma'am.
Love
nice
you,
to
Anna.
meet you
Thank
a
you
lot.
for including me.
So the first question I want to ask you, I do things a little different because a lot of my shows are like an hour long. I just have conversations.
Yeah.
I just had a daughter. She's 1.5 years old. And one of the things I was thinking with your story that was really unique was being the race driver you were, being a woman in the industry, you shook everything. What was it like when you told your parents what you wanted to do? Like, do you remember their reaction when you're like, you could do anything you wanted to do? At what point in your life?
No, I didn't really. It was my sister right there, Brooke. She wanted to race go-karts.
Okay.
And I just said I'd do it too. So I don't think it was one of those things where it was like, I want to, Dad, Mom, I want to be a race car driver. It's not like that. It goes slower, right? So it's kind of like you go out and you start racing and then you start winning and then you go from regional to like local to regional and then regional to national. And so it just kind of keeps going and going and you're doing it at 10 years old for fun.
Yeah.
So like it's not like you're planning your life at 10.
Right.
Although I did think to myself at 10 years old, I thought, I'm going to go to college for engineering so I can learn how to work on my race car.
Okay.
Right? I thought
Yeah.
that. And then I realized when I left home at 16 to move to England for racing, I realized that you didn't have to do any of that. You didn't need to know anything about engineering. It was up to someone else. So gone for that dream, thankfully, because that would have been distracting and taken time. But I did go to my own college for racing, which was England, and it was not only helped me about cars, but mostly about life. I actually didn't learn that much about cars. So anyway, came back when I was 16 and then, 19, went over when I was 16, came back when I was 19, and then, a few more steps and then IndyCar.
Did you have someone in your life that kind of helped you make the right connections to get to that point? Because as a small podcaster, like there's a guy named, I'll shout out Siaka Massaquoi, awesome guy if you've never met him. He's the nicest guy you're ever going to meet. He connected me with Michael Knowles. It was the kindest thing anyone could possibly do. Did you have someone that, looking back on this person, really helped you make a connection that you just didn't think you were going to make?
I think it was really from like pounding the pavement, like being out there. I got a reputation from my go-karting like career of performing and winning. And then I would say, there was one person that I feel like advocated for me early on, Lynn St. James. She was a race car driver. And one of the things that helped the most with probably like the next step after go-karting was she brought me to this suite in Turn 2 with this very wealthy family. And I sat at the bar and drank a kitty cocktail while I talked to some British guy for a while. And I guess I asked all the right questions because I was 14 at this time. They contacted me after following my career for the next 2 years and said, hey, you're old enough now, we'd like to take you to Europe and help like cultivate you into a race car driver professionally. And so it was from like Lynn taking me to that family and that suite and speaking to the people there that, allowed the next step to unfold. And so I lived in England for 3 years.
Wow. And when was that?
From 16 to 19.
Okay, perfect.
So I left high school.
Gotcha.
When I was a junior. So halfway through my junior year.
Wow. And then I want to talk about politics in a second because I know that we're at AmFest, but my whole life growing up, I saw Danica Patrick everywhere. And so
how old are you?
I'm 30.
Okay.
And so,
that sounds about right.
From the GoDaddy commercials to I just remember seeing Danica Patrick everywhere. Yeah. And so
see more now at GoDaddy.com.
There you go. Perfect. And it was just one of those situations where I'm like, we could talk about politics, but like, I'm really interested in your story. So if it's okay, I'd love to keep talking about.
The best interview is when you just like come from the heart and you ask the question you want to know because inevitably there's going to be someone out there thinking the same thing.
Yeah, and I think
if not, at least you just got your questions answered.
I know. Well, and for me, like legitimately because as a parent, I want my daughter to have the best opportunity to pursue things that she wants to do. And you blazing through the, pun intended, racing fun, blazing through was pretty good. Okay, blazing through the industry as you did is just like, man, talking to Danica would be really awesome because I'm like, you turned it on your head, and were you the only female race car driver in NASCAR when you were at that
Yeah.
stage?
Yeah.
What was that like, be in that?
I was so used to it.
Yeah.
I mean, because IndyCar came before NASCAR, and so I started NASCAR when I was 30. So I was used to it. And I mean, I guess I was always used to it. And I don't even know if used to it's the right word, because I never knew different, right? So, like, how would I know what it was like? It was always a bunch of guys and me. So every now and again, there was girls. At the end of my IndyCar career, which was, again, like up until, was it 2011, 12 was the last year? 11 or 12, 11. I mean, there was more women at the very end.
Sure.
I think there was quite a few women in the Indy 500 at the very end before I left. And then since then, it's been zero sometimes, right?
Yeah,
so like,
right.
it doesn't. It's like the stock market, you know. It very
Ebbs and
slow.
flows, yeah.
It ebbs and flows, but it, like, overall, there's like an upward trajectory. It's not a very big one, but and honestly, I don't care that there isn't. It's not. I'm not a feminist. I'm not someone who thinks like women should do this, and I just think that people should do what they love doing, and they should be honest, and they should work their butt off, and they should.
And if you're good at it,
get
your
good at it,
exactly. Right.
Like, that's it. Like,
earn it, work for it.
Exactly. And so, I think that, you know, maybe it's not ever something that will be 50-50.
Sure.
Not everything is supposed to be 50-50.
Absolutely. And it probably shouldn't be 50-50.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, when I'm talking about my daughter, I'm like, no, she's earning whatever she's doing at the end of the day. But if there's opportunity, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm an athlete. I played basketball my whole life. I don't look like it now. I married an Italian,
No, you're
had a
tall,
bunch of,
though, I can tell.
you know, but they have that gut, you know, whatever. But I remember a missed three-pointer that I had to win a championship, and it haunts me.
Yeah.
Do you have a move? Do you have a race?
Oh.
Do you have a race in your brain that you're like, if I would have made this move?
I mean,
walk us through maybe one of those memories that you're
well,
like.
I mean, I think the one that comes to mind first is really my first Indy 500. So I was really fast all month. It's a month because we're there for like so many weeks, and there's qualifying, and then there's.
Oh my goodness, is it really?
Like, the way it used to be structured, you were on track for like 3 weeks basically.
And did you?
So
sorry,
we used to
did
call
you have
it
to
the month
earn
of
it
May.
each time to keep moving forward?
So there'd be like a week of practice, and then there was qualifying for the top. It was changed. It was like front row, and then it was top 11 positions. It just changed, and then or like top 30 positions in the last row had to qualify
and did
the
that
next
influence
weekend.
your seating on where you started the race?
Yes. So
Okay.
the qualifying for the first weekend sort of established the front of the pack, basically.
Okay.
And then the next weekend would be bump day, so the last row would be qualifying.
Okay.
And then the next weekend was a race, so you were there a long time, and you'd practice all week pretty much. So I was fast all month, and I almost qualified on the pole, but I almost spun in turn one on my first lap of qualifying, which still landed me P4 for qualifying. So I started inside of the second row because it's 3 wide for the start of the Indy 500. So I started fourth, and then I'd led 19 laps. I was leading at the end, and I had ran my tires a long time based on some circumstances that happened at the end of the race. And so I was also saving fuel as much as I could. So we were like detuning me and taking fuel away from that engine, which gives it less power. And so we basically tuned me out so much that second place caught me at the end. And I guess looking back, I would have just said, screw it. And you'd have just ran whatever it took to maintain the gap. And if you run out of fuel, you run out of fuel. Because I ended with like 2.5 gallons left.
You're like, oh, come on.
Which is like 2.5 laps. And so I look at that and I think of that as the thing, but I also am not a regret person, and I would never go back and change anything, because I also believe in that butterfly effect, you know, like that one thing leads to the next, or sliding doors, whatever analogy.
Everything's a learning opportunity.
And everything leads to the next.
Yeah.
And so what happens if I'd have won my first Indy 500? It's like my 4th race in an IndyCar, and then what happens with my life at that point? What kind of other things would have happened? I love where I'm at now.
Yes.
I wouldn't change anything. So that's the one thing where I'm like, oh, I look back, but I still wouldn't change it. It's just something that could have gone differently.
Yeah, I completely understand. 2 more quick questions. What's our time frame? 10 minutes? Is it what we're aiming for?
You're good. You can
Are we
ask
okay?
more. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I want to be very cautious of your
good.
time. I didn't want to.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
you're welcome.
you.
So,
You're fun to talk to.
thank you. I appreciate that. Being a podcaster, I like doing research of like guests that you've enjoyed. Would you mind sharing the best podcast you've been on and who that conversation was with?
Best podcast I've been on?
Yeah, not named Dylan England. I understand you're probably going to say me now. No, I'm just kidding. But if you had if there's a conversation like this interview was one of the most fun interviews I did because I love doing the research as I learn.
Well, I took off, hit the ground running when I was promoting my book, pretty intense in 2018. It was the beginning of 2018. I didn't know anything about podcasts. I was still racing. I finished my career in 2018. And so I was out promoting my book, and they were like, all right, well, do some podcasts to promote your book. And this sounds really dumb. I feel really bad. I hope this doesn't feel insulting to him or to any of these people. But I just had my head in a hole with racing, and I didn't know about podcasts. But I did 3 really great podcasts.
Okay.
I did Joe Rogan, Lewis Howes, and Rich Roll. And so those are the 3 I did. And
wow.
I
good starter point.
I didn't even know them then.
No.
Which is wild, right?
Wow. Did you know how big Joe's was when you were walking into it? You had no clue.
I had only heard because
it's only like the #1 podcast in the world.
I had
no
only
big
heard
deal.
because the person I was dating was like, "Oh, you're gonna be on that show? Oh yeah, I heard." I'm like, "You were? Yes, I guess."
That's awesome.
But yeah, obviously he's a legend, and
yes.
he's one of the most. I mean, look, he played a huge role in this campaign.
Yes.
To be able to endorse Trump.
Yeah.
Because people trust him.
Yeah.
And he's been pretty
he's been centrist.
Down
He's
the
been
middle,
very
he's trying to be a good reporter to some degree. It's just allow people an opportunity and give them questions and help everybody make their own decision. But when he did that and then had Trump on and then Kamala didn't go on, it's all that played a big role.
Well, that's a good segue into one more question I want to ask you. So I read somewhere, and if this is false, please correct me, that this was one of the first times you voted.
It is.
Okay, so I didn't want to lie.
I've never voted
That was
before.
Trevor's question.
That's
you
right.
nailed it.
I had never
That's
voted
Trevor,
before.
by the way, producer.
Hi,
He's
Trevor.
awesome.
I had a rule for myself before. I had a rule for myself overall, which was, if I'm not voting, I'm not going to complain. It didn't mean I didn't have an opinion, but I just didn't share it.
Right.
I mean, my family and my friends and everybody knows me, knows where I stand along the way and who I wished would have or I'm glad is president. But it wasn't like I ever talked about it or complained about it because I didn't do my part.
Right.
And so I kind of jump in the deep end.
Yeah.
So
a little bit.
I went from I don't know podcasts to these podcasts. I went from I don't know politics to jumping in the deep end and being all in and literally campaigning, being on the trail for months.
What was it about Donald Trump specifically? Was it him or the team of people he has that really...
Both. I was glad when he was president in 2016, and I was bummed that he wasn't president in 2020.
Yeah.
Although I think that in hindsight, this is the best way it could have gone down. Because a lot more is going to get done this time around.
I think the country was a lot more ready for it.
Exactly.
I think the country was more ready for it this time.
Yeah, so I think that all the cherries on top just is what ended up making it a landslide. It kind of still blows me away that 77 million people still voted for Kamala?
But
was that what the difference
did
is? Did they?
Did they? Did they?
Yeah.
It was kind of late.
But I think that unfortunately...
I think they're still counting California. I don't know.
Wow. A lot of people voted for her against Trump, so you have to understand that existed too. But I mean, overall, I just think that this was, look, at the end of the day, he's a businessman, and I think that this country needs to be run more like a business.
Have you received any, how Donald Trump, everyone loved Donald Trump, The View, everyone, and
of
then
course.
he ran, and now they hate him.
Right.
Have you received any backlash, brand issues for coming in supporting Donald Trump that you just weren't expecting?
No.
Wow.
But it was me coming to this event last year and posting about it that created a backlash and a judgment on me for being here that motivated me to get involved.
Yeah.
So there was, but it was only an uprising, to be honest, only a positive upswing. And I think that's what happens when you get in alignment.
Yes.
Even if something does fall away, which something didn't, but if something does fall away, something else will come through.
Yeah, how many more opportunities are maybe going to be better?
Exactly. When you're in your truth and when you're speaking from the heart and you believe in something enough, it is like a magnet for other things. So it also helps people know what they can do with you, right? Other companies, other businesses, other people. So I think it's a big tool to speak your truth.
Perfect. Well, I'll wrap up at 15 minutes. I could talk to you for another hour. You've been lovely. Thank you so much.
You've been amazing. Thank you so much.
So last thing before, any anything right now you would like to promote, anything at all? I just always give people an opportunity to give a
very
shout out.
kind. I have a podcast, pretty intense podcast that comes out every week. I make wine, Somnium wine.
Okay,
so if you
great.
like to drink a little wine, it's Danica Rosé is another one. Yeah, those are sort of my companies.
Perfect. Well, follow her podcast.
Yeah.
We'll make sure we connect with your sister, someone to get socials and stuff like that, if that's okay.
Thank you. It's all my name.
Yeah. Well, only my mom watches my show, so no, I'm joking. And could you do me one
gotta
more
start somewhere.
thing off camera? There's a girl right there in the white. She's been very kind.
Okay,
She just
great.
wants you to sign her hat. And get a
Great,
picture.
yeah, of
Would
course.
You mind doing that for
Not
me
a problem.
second?
Of
And
course.
can we get one picture? And
Yeah.
I know you have a million things. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm taking forever. I'm so sorry.
You're
Thank
great.
you so much.
You're great.